Wait for a few people to join. All right, okay. Hi everyone, welcome to Viva-Mundo's webinar of 2020. I have with me today Audencia Business School and the lovely Benjamin Rathmel, who will be doing your presentation today for you all. Let me just, before we begin, go through a little bit about Viva-Mundo and what we do. We are here to exist to help you guys actually on your way to your next chapter in life, whether that be visa applications, destinations, anything to do with education and options of studying abroad. Now, let me talk you through the Zoom viewer. What we will do today is, if we could only use the question box in the corner, the Q&A box for any questions, that'd be great, but any questions are welcome throughout the whole webinar. Please do ask any questions you like and we'll get to those right at the end. This is also being streamed on our Salud Your Estudiante page on Facebook, so please do give it a like if you want to find out more about Viva-Mundo. And I think that's it from me, but Ben, shall I pass the floor over to you?
That's perfect. Thanks a lot. And thanks to everybody who's joining me today. My name is Ben. I am International Admissions Manager at Audencia Business School. I'm here to talk a little bit today about business schools in France and studying in English in France. I think, I really wanted to do this presentation because I think that there's kind of a misunderstanding about, study in Europe, especially study in France. So I think that, I can talk a little bit about some of the advantages and differences of what happens when you come to study in France and specifically some of the things that we do at Audencia. So I'm not going to go really deep into programs or any the specific information about admissions for us. If you do have any questions about that, you can always contact us at international@audencia.com. But I thought that this just could be pretty useful for people who might be considering the different study abroad options and just kind of learning a little bit about the differences or some of the advantages of studying abroad with us in France. So, I think just from the title already, you can see, it is possible to do business studies or, various types of studies in France and learn entirely in English, which I think is one of the advantages of, study abroad in France. Typically we tend to think of destinations like the United States, the United Kingdom to go and study, specifically if we want to study in English. But I think that there are a few advantages that we have over some of these options, and we can talk about them. But I think just already we can kind of see that one of the advantages of studying in France is if you're able to get all of the different techniques and principles in a language that you're comfortable with, and then outside of the classroom have exposure to a brand new culture, brand new language. I always think that that's advantageous, particularly for people that want to work on that international scale. So once again, I'm not going to try to speak too much directly about us, but I'm often going to be using some of the information that pertains to us to highlight what study abroad in France can offer. And I think here you can already see some of the areas of study that we do. This is like what you can study in any business school. We do have some specializations maybe that are based in where we're from. We have a history in Nantes of working with supply chain management or responsible management, meaning environmental and social responsibility in business. So I think to a certain extent you can find some areas that we do better than others because of where we are, but I also think that we cover the entire spectrum of different subjects that you can study anywhere else in the world. Academic excellence, you'll find that there are schools like us that have a long history. We, of course, were founded more than 100 years ago. In terms of ranking currently, we're ranked number 6 in France. Typically, we're top 20 to 40 in Europe and then 60 to 80 worldwide. And when you take a look at some of the similarly ranked programs around the world, I think that one of the advantages too is not only the different types of areas that you can study, but when you compare similarly ranked programs to what we do, the tuition fees, often there's a large disparity between what is offered in Europe, and particularly in France, and what might be offered in the United States and United Kingdom. So here you can see some information about what we're known for in terms of education and research. And of course, we have the triple accreditation, which means that the degrees are recognized throughout the world. That's kind of highlighted here too in our national recognitions or European recognitions. So you'll see here that there's something that's called a Grande École system in France, and a lot of times misunderstood, I think, internationally. They're not really sure about, what does this system mean, and what's the difference between, private education and public education, specifically in Europe. But I find that there's a great comparison that I can make. When you hear about these Grandes Écoles, which we are a part of, it's noted here about halfway down the slide, and called the Conférence des Grandes Écoles. This is like the Ivy League system in the US. Basically, these are the elite schools that have a certain level of recognition internationally, and we've grouped together to make a sort of group of schools that are recognized for the quality education that they provide. So, that's one of the comparisons that I make that could be very useful in thinking about the equivalencies of the offers that are found around the world, is that when you're looking at these Grandes Écoles, that's one of the differences. And these Grandes Écoles are private institutions. You will see public institutions in France. Many times, depending on where you may be coming from, there's always this discussion about public versus private, and there can either be a sense of quality one way or another, depending on where you're coming from. Sometimes the state schools are better than the private institutions, and sometimes the private institutions are better than the state schools. In France, typically what happens at universities is that it's seen as a public service. Many times the degrees will be taught entirely in French. They tend to not have the same sort of international recognition and standards. You may have heard of a few universities like the Sorbonne or something like that, but many times these universities, public institutions, tend to focus on more of a domestic crowd and catering their programs to those needs. On the flip side, you have the private schools, which tend to have more programs in English, tend to have the international recognition. They also tend to have international partnerships and a program that is a little bit more, I guess, catered to the needs of people who are working internationally. We won't just be focusing on, a French regulatory environment. We'll be discussing what it's like to do import and export, across the world, and not just focusing on one particular area where we may be working. But here are a few of the local recognitions that we have. The ones that are really important for our international students. These are all three major international business school accreditations. So EQUIS is the continental European sort of accreditation. ACSB is recognition from the United States, and AMBA is one that comes from the UK. And only fewer than 1% of the business schools worldwide have all three of these international accreditations. So I think one of the advantages of study abroad in France is many times the business schools will focus on these international accreditations to make sure that the degree that's earned is recognized throughout the world, and that it doesn't just focus on working in one particular area, but instead tries to give a recognition anywhere in the world, so that the student can take that degree and work anywhere that they would like, and it will have that recognition of quality. Rankings are also important. Like I said, I had mentioned a few of them before, but here are a few of the areas or a few of the publications that we're ranked with: Financial Times, CNN, The Economist, and you can be assured of the quality of the education at our institution because of these. I think many employers often use accreditations and international rankings as sort of a litmus test if they're not aware of the institution just by the name alone. And then once again, nationally, we have quite a few rankings as well. Of what it looks like to study in a French business school. If you compare us to different universities, we are a fairly large school, if we just take into account that we focus on master's degrees, so graduate school of business, and that it just focuses on business education, many times you will have these larger institutions that will combine many different faculties where we tend to separate, specialize more. So you'll find more engineering schools or business schools or different schools that will focus on a particular training for particular professions. And so we focus on graduate studies in business, and that's why we have about 5,000 students, which may seem small in comparison to these large universities, but I really do think that it gives us an advantage because we're able to really focus in on the needs of a particular group of people and not have to sort of expand any sort of useless services if it doesn't apply to you. For example, all of the services and facilities that will be had or will be found in one of these business schools will concern students who are doing these higher level studies, particularly for business. I think another advantage that we have is the European business schools tend to have a large number of international students from a wide variety of countries. Sometimes we have the impression that in certain universities in the United States or in the UK, they have a large number of international students, but it tends to be, somewhere around 10 or 15%, where we've nearly doubled that. We do have an objective to have 50% international students and 50% French students, but, from a wide variety of different nationalities so that they can bring something to the classroom and it's really able to learn from each other and not just from the professors. I think that that's really important. We find that our strength is in our diversity, and that when you bring such a vast array of experiences into the classroom, you're really able to benefit from other people's knowledge and not just from the lesson of the day, but learning how to work with people from a variety of different backgrounds. That really imitates the international workspace that you're going to find after graduation. Many times we will put our students into groups when they are working on a project, not allowing them to select who they're going to be working with. And that is so that you're able to interact and learn how to adjust to different working styles. If you have an engineer and you have somebody coming from medicine, you have somebody else coming from marketing and from finance, and you put them together on a project, you have a wide variety of different opinions on how to approach that project and what to do with it or how to communicate about it. And I really believe that students, when they have that experience, it really prepares them for the international workspace environment, and not just to, learn how to be very similar in a very homogeneous environment. Instead, we're providing that sort of stimulus and alternatives and different ways of approaching projects. And I really believe that our strength is in that wide array of different types of people that we bring into the classroom. We also have a wide variety of different academic partners, and our teaching staff represents that diversity in our student body as well. So almost 50% of our professors come from abroad. Once again, in order to be able to bring different perspectives, we don't want to have sort of a standard cookie cutter approach to teaching management. That's not what you're going to find in the real world working environment. So we want our participants and our teachers to reflect the diversity that you're going to find when you're working in the boardroom later on. It's not just about learning marketing, finance principles, and human resources and supply chain in the classroom, but it's about learning these very practical skills that will help you to perform as a manager from day one with no additional training. And now with the businesses that we're working with today, they really do require that ability to feel comfortable working in that international space. So once again, I think that's just another advantage that we bring to the classroom, is that focus on teaching the skills that will help people in their careers after graduation. The diversity really creates an environment where students are able to learn how to adjust to those different working styles. It's not necessarily a class that's given like a marketing class, but it's through doing that you're able to accumulate the skills and working and feeling comfortable in that type of environment. The next part I think is also very important, which is European schools, French business schools tend to focus on career development. Once again, this isn't a class that you take, but it's something that runs in parallel to what you're doing in your classroom activities. So you're going to have your marketing classes, and you've got your accounting classes and everything like that, but you also have the workshops that you need to do with our career services department. And career services is all about what are you going to do after graduation. 1, 2, possibly 3 years that you may spend with us, that's great. But the important part is not what happens during the program, but really how it's able to help you to progress and evolve and adapt to your career. And I think that career services is something that can be lacking in other areas, but something that we put an enormous amount of resources in to make sure that students are able to get the real practical training that they need in order to continue with their career. I'll give a couple of examples of the things that they do. So, you know, there is a career counseling sort of office that is there to help any of our students who might be asking themselves, you know, I'm not really sure what I want to do with my career. I may have a couple of ideas, but I'm not really sure what type of jobs I'd be applying for, what type of companies or industries I want to work in. And that's really important to know once you graduate. Many times your first jobs after graduation will mold the path that your career will take. And we want to make sure that you have all of the information and skills and the abilities to be able to get into that right career path that's right for you. So we work with counselors who either have, you know, a significant amount of experience working in human resources for large companies, or people who would work as headhunters who know what businesses are looking for and what type of qualities they need in their applicants. And so they can really help students to adjust their profile to the needs of the business, because it's not just about sort of putting out 5,000 applications to many different businesses and then just hoping for a handful of them to come back. It's really about adapting your profile to the needs of the company. That's why the company has that offer out there. They have a need and they need somebody to be able to fulfill those needs. And the career counseling department really helps to accompany students to get to know what the business's needs are. You know, what is their mission statement? What type of products are they working with? Where are they expanding? What will you be able to do for them? And that's why you'll be able to see this placement rate. You know, it's actually above 95% within 2 months now. But it's because of the work that you put into it. And it's not so much about the mass of applications that you send out, but about adapting each application to the needs of that company that you're applying to. And that's why you see that great success rate. So that's one service that they offer. They can also offer you know, psychometric testing if you're really not sure what you want to do, or you're not sure if working in a bank is better than working in a factory, or you know, you just don't know what's out there and what the options and possibilities are. You know, they can even go through and start helping you identify what your strengths and your interests are, and what types of industries and companies that match with, to really make sure that you have you know, all the information that you need in order to start your career out. Another service that they offer is they maintain our online database of job offers. So over 17,000 job offers are sent directly to us. If you remember, we have about 5,000 students at the school, and we get more than 17,000 job offers that are sent to us. And these are ones that are sent directly to us. This isn't like some sort of service where we go out to a jobs platform and then we just these are the jobs that are sent directly to us. These are companies that want Audencia students to work with them. We've also worked together with other schools in order to make a larger target for these companies that might be looking for students coming from French business schools. And then when we combine ourselves with other business schools in order to make that larger target, we get over 91,000 job offers. So that's, you know, shared among other you know, institutions that also have students that can go into these jobs. But I think altogether, they really want to be able to maintain the number of offers, to get out there and to show the quality of our students to these businesses so that they'll come to us for you know, hiring our graduates. And they also work with businesses with other services. So, you know, our sort of corporate relations department has a couple of different facing sides. One is more student facing, where we offer you know, jobs counseling and workshops on how to adapt your CV or interview skills. But they also have sort of a business facing side. So they do consulting projects for businesses. They do you know, research with them. They do training sessions for different businesses. And when those businesses come in, a lot of times they're going to express a need they have, whether it's through the training or through the research that we're doing. And they can also do a little bit more of a matchmaking. When our career counselors get to know our students, they know what their skills and their talents are. And then when businesses are able to express their needs, they're much more easily able to make that connection. Many times they'll make CV books for these companies, or they'll arrange interviews with our current students so that our students can really get in front of these companies that are hiring for a very particular profile. So those are just a few of the things that they do, but I think it's really important to realize that it's not just the work that you're doing in the classroom that counts when you're looking at some of these business schools. Or at least I can say from our perspective, putting as many resources into that department is really important, because if a student has a great education but no possibility to use it after, it's really kind of a waste. It's much better when you're able to use the training that you get in the classroom to advance a career and to find yourself in a good position with your career going forward. So we do pay a lot of attention to that. Here are a few of the different offers that we've been talking about, in terms of interviews and online job platforms. And we went through that a little bit already. We do work with some of the most well-known companies in the world. I mean, many times students are asking, okay, well, if I go to a French business school, that means I'm going to be working in France, right? Well, no, really, that's not the majority of the different types of offers that we're getting. Even if we're working with French companies, these are the large French companies that you know about. You can see a few of them here from, L'Oreal, Nestle, and some of these European companies like BMW. So we do have a sort of visibility, a recognition, name recognition that comes much more easily with some of these companies. But remember that they're not just hiring for down the road. These are large corporations that have activities throughout the world, and they're aware of the quality of the education that we provide, and they're looking to hire our students for those different positions that they have around the world. And then in addition to that, we also have non-European companies who are interested in us, and once again, they tend to know us because of these accreditations and these rankings and the recognition of the quality that you get. So just to kind of underline this dedication to career development, we work with these companies in order to solve the different issues that they have, and to have our students work with them so that they can recognize the quality of the training that we provide on the programs. So a little bit about where we are, because I think, when you're considering study abroad in France, you should also kind of know a little bit about where you're studying and what differentiates it from other cities or other countries that you could study in. So I'm going to take us as an example, but I would just invite you to take a look at some of these conditions or qualities of where you're going to be looking at or looking to study at, because it's really important. So for us, we're a very academic and international city. I tend to refer to us as sort of the Cambridge of France, because we're 2 hours away from the capital. We have close access to some of the main orders of these companies that we're working with. But we have a quality of living that's a much higher standard than what you can find in many capital cities. It's much more livable. When you're in these sort of academic research hubs, they tend to be stimulating because there's always something going on for students. But once again, it's not that you have to spend an hour in the underground in order to be able to get where you need to go. Many times it's a much more accessible area to live in, much higher standard of living, I believe, than what you can find in many capitals. So at least for us, I think it does provide this welcoming environment, this international environment where you see students coming from all around the world, because we're not the only higher education institution that's international like this. I think you'll find several of them here in Nantes, and that's why, and walking through the streets, you'll hear English, you hear of different international participants who are coming to study. I think here being voted as #2 most welcoming French city for expats is just kind of underlining that fact that it is a very international environment. And when you have a student city, there's a certain dynamic to it where you do then have services that are there to support them and to welcome them. So I think that's where you get this standard as being #2 in France because of all the resources that we put into this. Also, when you're going to study abroad in France, there's a very long history. We tend to be known for tourism as well, because we're in a certain valley where there are many castles, kings that would live in the capital would come down to this area for its beauty, and they would build summer homes and castles and these types of things, and you can go and visit them. This is our city just in terms of size. So once again, we're number 6 in France. And to give you an idea of the composition, there's more than 60,000 students for 800,000 inhabitants, and it grows to about 1 million when you consider some of the suburban areas. But you can see that there's a very dense population of students, and particularly in the university districts, you'll find many students that are there. We're also close to the coast. If you are interested in living by the seaside, it's very easy to get there. Public transport works very well in this area. So whether it's inside of the city when you're using the tram system or the bus systems, it's very easy to get around. And then in addition to that, you can use buses and trains and light rail in order to get further away from the city and closer to the coast or to other areas of France and throughout Europe. So I think that gives the possibility of exploring new areas, exploring new cities, new countries, and having a real international experience when you're able to very easily get from one place to another without needing any sort of car. For example, public transport works quite effectively in anywhere that you might need to go in the area that's covered by a student visa, which is the entire Schengen zone. And once again, we're just 2 hours from Paris, so very easily you can go in a day, go up and do any sort of interviews or any sort of administrative tasks that you need in the capital, and then be back within the same day or a weekend if you would like to go up there. City, and it's really because of all of the factors that I've mentioned. On top of that, I also think just in terms of cost, when you have a city that's very much focused on international students, the economy sort of adapts to that, and the types of services or the types of products that are offered. It's very much centered on that student demographic. And there's many different housing options for students who are living in Nantes. So I think in terms of even just the cost of living, when you compare it to some of the larger cities, in particular the capital, we may be a third of what it may cost to live in one of those cities. So that's another thing that you may want to think about when you're considering where you want to go, is what is going to be the standard of living and what's going to be the cost. Basically, it's not just the tuition fee. So we already talked a little bit about comparing different programs at similar rankings and the cost that's involved in the tuition fees. But in addition to that, you also want to consider how much is it actually going to cost for living there and in your day-to-day expenses. And that's also one of the reasons why we're the second least expensive city in France when we're talking about these larger cities, not some small village, but an actual city that you can live in and still find value in the money that you're spending there. We're also known as a green capital. So we were Europe's green capital in 2013. There is a large, there's this need for the city to present green spaces and to have public transport and to sort of get away from that congested urban environment that you can find in some capitals. So we put a lot of resources into that as well, which makes it once again a very livable environment. When you have green spaces around you, it does really make a difference in where you're living. Just with the cycle paths and the amount of green space that we have per person, I think it makes for a very comfortable environment to live in. But here's where we were voted by the European Commission as the capital of innovation. I mean, when you're a student city, I think one of the advantages is that you have so many new ideas and so many different intelligent people who are working on a lot of different types of products and ways to disrupt current economies. And so our startup lab at the school, for example, is a great way to show how we are fostering innovation in what we're doing. It's not just about teaching people the principles, but it's about using it and putting it into a practical case. So we have a startup lab that works with a variety of different institutions here in Nantes, different fab labs or organizations that are also sort of fostering innovation in order to be able to provide products that may be disruptive, that are innovative, and that can fill a need that has been we're focusing on is new ways of doing things. And when you have, like I said, that university environment, the academic environment, it really does foster that innovation and new ways of thinking. So I think we're quite fortunate about that. but we're also an economic hub. When you have that innovation and when you have that sort of stimulus and need to go and to create and to do, the economics follows behind that. And we are known for that. This is where we have so many startups and so many different businesses that are creating innovative and positive solutions. And we're number one for our economic growth. Because of that, because we have so many different resources that can be put forward in order to provide new solutions. I think it really does place us very well economically, and also just the rate of employment and startup creation. I think that speaks volumes about what we're doing here, not just taking that sort of theoretical and academic approach. You're not just coming here for a degree, but to do something and to partake in the economy, whether it's local or abroad. I think another thing that we tend to do in French business schools, in France in particular, is we do focus on the student life. We tend to think of our student body as a population, almost like it's a place where you not only get the business training, but you learn how to be a good business person. And when we think about what a good business person does, they do have a balanced life. They find a way in order to be able to socialize with others, in order to be able to find, some sort of physical activity or some sort of interest that can be linked to what they do professionally, but it doesn't have to be. I think it's a great way to be able to find that balance in your life. If you study hard during the program, you should have some sort of way to release and to socialize with people. So we do that in a variety of different ways. We have tons of different associations and clubs that can be joined. We have sports facilities, which isn't always the case in business schools, but we're fortunate enough to have that. We have different activities that are going on throughout the year. We really want it to be a full experience for students, and particularly for international students who might find it somewhat intimidating to be in a new environment, particularly if it's your first time studying abroad. Maybe you're a bit hesitant to go out and to meet new people. I think being the place where you can safely interact with people and meet new people who have similar interests is really important in order to be able to build that network that's going to follow you throughout your career. We do a lot of these activities in order to be able to support that. And I think in particular one is our international connections team, which I think has a slide a little bit later on, but if not, I'll come back to it and talk a little bit about this club, which is there in order to foster the relations between international students and domestic students. When I was talking about Nantes in terms of why it is advantageous to live in a sort of academic city like ours, housing is one of the big problems that international students can have sometimes, access to housing or the cost of housing. And so, I think we do a good job in order to be able to provide all of the different options that a student can have. And it makes it much more affordable when we're able to sort of negotiate different spaces with housing providers. And a few of the different housing options that you can find, and this is in many different European cities as well, will be host families. If you want to have more of a cultural experience, you want to live with a family and you want to be able to ask questions about what you saw during the day, I think it could be a great opportunity in order to be able to have that cultural experience that can run in parallel to the work that you're doing inside of the classroom. But for students that want to live with other students in these residencies, there are a couple of different options as well. So one is a government subsidized housing option, which is called Crous, and you'll find this nationally throughout France. One thing to consider about these is they tend to be some of the options that are taken first. They are subsidized by the government, which makes the rent very attractive, and they have good facilities. Sometimes, Wi-Fi won't be included in the rent. You'll have to work that into your budget as well. But for the price, I think that there's a real value in working with these, but they tend to fill up early. So keep that in mind, that when you are looking for housing during your program in France, you'll to look at housing fairly early. They tend to fill up in the month of April. So keep that in mind when you're doing the search for housing. There's also private residencies. So typically you won't find schools in France or in continental Europe that are going to have their own housing facilities. It's just the way that many European cities are set up, or the economic model that the schools may have. They may be focusing a little bit more on the academics and the sort of services that are focused in on the professionalization of the student, rather than some of these other revenue sources that could be had from an institution. So do keep that in mind, that there are these private residency options, and many times schools will be partnered with different residencies to make sure that they provide the minimum services for international students, have somebody that speaks English at the front desk, those types of things. So those tend to be the options that you'll find when you're looking for a study abroad in France. A couple of photos of Nantes, sort of giving you the idea of what the French lifestyle is. So typical things that you can find when you're a student studying in France. So explore the local castles and vineyards. I mean, France is one of the great tourist destinations in the world. And I think that using the time outside the classroom to explore and to be able to see some of these cultural sites can be very interesting for students. It's something where you'll be able to then grow in a personal way as well, to have the ability to show these experiences that you've lived through, and having it just down the road, I think is an amazing experience. And it's something that isn't quite normal, specifically for somebody like myself who's coming from the US. And it's something that I like to share with people a lot, about the history and the city that you're living in and getting to know a little bit about that. Like I said, there's the Atlantic coast as well. So if you like doing any sort of activities that deal with the ocean, it is very accessible to do that. And also, France is very well known for its, its culinary arts, and you will have access to a lot of these different restaurants or markets that you'll be able to try out some of these foods. And once again, it's more of a personal fulfillment. Now, this doesn't deal directly with business studies, but a lot of times I think people who do have these experiences, and then find themselves in international workspaces, they're much more prepared for those eventual positions when you're able to go out and to explore and interact with others, and to really have an interesting experience, not only inside the classroom, but outside. Moving on. Lifestyle, you can get easily to other countries as well. One of the nice things I like is that in a matter of hours, on a train, you can be in a completely different country, a new language, a new culture. You have access to all of the countries in the Schengen zone when you have a French visa. So, there's a lot of possibilities to go out and to see new areas that are very, very close and that don't require, an airplane ride. Many of the cities are connected by rail, and it's quite easy to get a rail pass and go around many different countries on vacation periods, and to have that real international European experience that I don't think that you can find outside. Once again, cuisine, there's not much more I can add to that. And then, of course, the nightlife. The nice thing about French cities in particular is it tends to be a very dense city center. So many of the activities that you can do, during your evenings, whether it's restaurants or bars or dance clubs or any of these activities, can be found in a fairly condensed area. You don't have to go from one side of the city to another in order to be able to get to it. You may be living outside of the city center or inside it, depending on the residencies that you choose. But it's then very easy to go in, a matter of 10, 15 minutes to the city center and to be in the middle of all of these nighttime activities. And I think it makes for a very satisfying experience, at least for international students that are looking to have that type of experience. I've talked a lot about budget. This is what you can expect in a student city like ours. Like I said, when you're looking at capital cities, many times you can multiply this by 2, 3, 4 times. And also not only in terms of the expenses, but the accessibility of being able to get your day-to-day needs. And I think that we're very well positioned for that. So once again, if I'm starting to pull together some of these ideas about the advantages of study abroad in France, I think one of the main things that come out is the amount of quality that you can get for the investment that you're putting in. The investment, when you compare it to other areas that you could live in or other schools that you could work with that have a similar ranking, you'll see there's a huge disparity in the amount that people will have to spend in order to be able to go to similarly ranked institutions. So in order to get the same quality of education, you're having to invest in more, not only in the tuition fees, but in your day-to-day activities, in your living costs. club that I wanted to talk about from before. So we do invest a lot in student life, and this is one of the great clubs to join. And I think a lot of different schools have this, because when you have such a large population of international students, you really do want to make sure that there's this exchange. You don't want it to be divided, between national and international students. The whole purpose of it is to have students engaging each other and sharing information and learning from each other. And so the International Connection team is there specifically for that. They'll hold different activities in order to highlight a holiday from a certain culture, or there could be a food event where people will bring foods from their country, and then everybody will be able to go from one stand to another in order to be able to get the food from these different countries. So they do a great job of being able to not only have our international students being in contact with our domestic students, but also even amongst the international students, providing a space where you're able to really kind of enjoy differences and explore all of the differences between the participants in our programs. So this is another sort of thing I can cover. I can talk about our application process because it may be a little bit different. And when you're applying for these different schools, there are a couple of different application processes that you can see. We do run on our rolling admissions process, where there's an online application. I think that you'll also find with some of the applications, they tend to be a little bit more succinct. They tend to focus on real qualities that we're looking for from students, rather than applications that may ask you for a whole lot of ancillary information that isn't really taken into account in the selection process. I think in our selection process, we really do identify the key points that relate to success on our programs, and that's what we want to ask you about. It's not there just to make you run for paperwork or to give us information that we're not going to use in some capacity or another. So this really streamlined and focused approach to business studies is something that I think you find a lot in European business schools in France in particular, and I think as an example, we really do embody that. We're only looking for the information that correlates to success on programs or to success in careers. Different things like letters of recommendation, for example, are not something that we look at because we don't know who the person is, and how can you compare one letter of reference to another letter of reference, and which one is better and which one correlates to better success on the program. There's just not really any use to it. A lot of times it can be a pain for students that have to go out and search for this information just to seemingly jump through a hoop that is really useless in the end. I think that our approach to really being as quick, as transparent, as clear as possible about the way that we select students, and really getting back to you in a good amount of time, and not having you waste your time is the best approach. Not to make any artificial barriers to the selection process, but instead try to make it as streamlined as possible. We know your time is important, and we want to make sure that the value that you get out of the time you spend with us, whether it's in the application process or during the program, is the best that you can get. This is us in the International Relations team. Contact any of us if you have any sort of questions. And here's how you can contact us. Now, if you want to open up to any sort of questions, so we talked a little bit before about where you can find the message box, and I do just kind of want to end the presentation there because I want to go and I want to cover any sort of questions that you might have that I didn't get to cover during the presentation. So the first question that I got is, do you have any kind of funding, financial aid support for international students? So if I can kind of link this to what I was talking about in the presentation, I think European and French business schools offer a great return on investment, and us in particular. When you focus so much on not only the career services so that somebody can get a good return, but also on the reduction of costs in terms of the investment on the part of the student, that's the ideal environment. You want the student to be able to make that that calculus and be able to say that they're getting a great value out of what they're doing on the program, and scholarships and financial aid are key to that. So yes, we have a wide variety of different scholarships, and many of them are project-based, or they will be an automatic scholarship in order to foster any sort of diversity in the classroom. We have several different scholarships for engineers, women engineers in our program, in order to diversify the classroom environment. or depending on nationality as well, because we always want to have the greatest amount of diversity in the classroom so that people can learn about the business context in the countries that are represented. Other ones are more project-based. So maybe you want to do an innovative startup dealing with the creative economy or with food and agribusiness. We have a couple of different scholarships that are dedicated to that. We do put a lot of resources into these because we want students to do something practical, whether it's part of our startup lab or whether they're going to incorporate it in their career later on. We will help to fund students that do want to work on something during the program. When you have these project-based scholarships, students are then able to benefit not only from the reduction in the tuition fees, but also from the expertise of our researchers that can then help to support them in defining the project or helping to realize it and bring it to fruition. So hopefully that answers your question. If you ever have any questions about which scholarships or financial support is available, a lot of times these are linked to the programs you're going to be applying for. It's usually pretty clearly stated on any program webpage. But once again, if you're not able to find that information, particularly for us, you can always contact us and we can show you where that information is found. Will the courses be taught online because of the coronavirus? So very topical. Currently, what we do is we listen to government officials and we listen to health experts about the opening of campuses. So right now, France is in a lockdown all the way up until May 11th. And so there isn't any sort of indication that that lockdown is going to continue until September. The official approach then is that, okay, we're ready to start everything up in September like we have for decades before. But that being said, many people don't know what's going to happen in the meantime, so we need to prepare a lot of different alternatives. I'll cite a couple of hypothetical or possible solutions to these cases here. So one could be a delay in an intake date. So let's say there's a lockdown that's extended for a certain period of time. It covers the beginning of the program. Maybe we can knock back the start date a couple of weeks to allow students to arrive. In addition to that, though, it's not only just the government indications here in France, but it's also abroad. Will people be able to leave? Will they be able to get into Europe? Will there be flights that are available? All of these different questions are still kind of up in the air. So in addition to that, we're also planning on distance learning that runs in parallel to on-site teaching. So let's say a student then is not able to find a flight that's affordable, or maybe there's complications in their local environment or with family or with any sort of decision like that. Why not then offer the possibility of being able to follow the courses online just the same as everybody else in the classroom environment, and then join that class at a later date? I think that's a great opportunity to be able to sort of adapt to this new situation. Or in the extreme cases, if campuses are closed, then we will redo the format of the program to make it all online. So we did that already with the programs that were kind of finishing up the academic year when COVID was a problem. So we're already prepared to do online courses. I think we're all very advanced in those teaching methods, so that is a possibility. And then it's just a matter of how will that be done. And in any case, for our students who have applied for an on-site program, we would be contacting them at that moment to get new enrollment documents that are adapted to a distance online learning format rather than the on-site format, which all of our enrollment documents are currently set towards. So we do have a lot of contingency plans that are ready depending on what happens in the coming months. But currently, since the lockdown does not extend all the way until September, the official planning is that we will be going forward as we always have done, and then we're ready to adjust depending on what happens. The next question is, could you please give me more information about the internship? How does that work? So internships, and this is kind of a good point. I'm glad that you're bringing up this question, because for us, and what happens at a lot of business schools, is that all of our programs have some sort of internship phase. Once again, it's that idea of incorporating practicality into the program. Sometimes people will have very little or no experience. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes there's a student that comes in and they're fresh from graduation from a bachelor's degree and they go right into the master's degree without having any sort of internship experience or work experience at all. I find this to be fundamental in business education, to provide some sort of internship period, because one, for that person who has no experience, you need to be able to get them some experience that they can go on with their career. Having a blank space in a professional experience area of your CV is not very attractive when you're looking for a new job. On top of that, for some people, maybe they worked before, but this is a new area that they're interested in. They want to know whether this is a place where they want to build their career. And being able to test that out and to see what it's like is really important. You may think that, yeah, I want to work in finance. I've always been interested by my finance classes and my finance teachers. My uncle used to work in finance, but until you really try it, maybe you don't know if that's where you want to build your career. You may go into the internship and go, that's not what I was expecting. Now, I have the time to be able to readjust my career expectations and adjust to that. So all of our programs involve some sort of internship because of that. You need to be able to either develop that professional experience area of your CV, or use it as an opportunity to make sure that it's a good fit for you. And our career services department has all of the resources because of that, because when you make that a mandatory part of the program, you have to have the services in order to be able to support that. You can't have half of your class not graduating because they're not able to get the internship opportunities. So the internship opportunities are not just limited to the postings or to the companies who are coming to recruit, but I also think it's the preparation part in order to make it more effective when they're applying for these internships and these jobs. It's not just about showing up and saying, all right, where am I working now? You have to be able to show that you can fulfill that need. And I think career services does a great job of that. Also, another important statistic is the amount of job offers that are given before graduation, and that's through the internships, because a lot of times when students will go in and work with the company will recognize the talent and the quality of the student and say, why don't you just stay on with us? And that's how 2/3 of our students get a job offer before graduation. Okay, so the next question is, I have a question. Could you repeat what study programs do you offer? So that's a little bit more about us in particular. I think we offer marketing courses, finance courses, human resources, supply chain management. We've got some specialist courses that focus on the creative economy, becoming somebody who wants to start up a YouTube channel or monetize an Instagram account, something like that. We got MBA programs. There's a wide variety of them. But I think one important thing to remember is just that, business schools in Europe pretty much treat the same subjects as any business school that you'll find throughout the world. Any department that you can think of in a business, we provide training for that. And then after, it depends on what type of education you're looking for. If you're looking for something very specific and niche, that can be a little bit more difficult to find than, I'm pretty sure any business school that's worth its name is going to provide finance courses and marketing, for example. So you can take a look at our site, and then if you don't find what you're looking for, just contact us at international@audencia.com. Just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to try to get to the rest of these questions. So, can I work while studying at the institution? This is another good question that relates to business schools in France, because one of the differences with a French visa is that you can work up to 20 hours per week. So you can work part-time while you're studying in France. You have the opportunity of being able to work, where sometimes with a student visa, that's not always possible, depending on where you're going to be studying. So I think that's an opportunity. It is a challenge, because when we provide so many activities and so many workshops and presentations and we bring in guest speakers, and there's so much to do, it can be hard to juggle that. So I would caution anybody who's looking at that. If you're looking at it to advance your professional career, I do want to work part-time in order to be able to get my sort of foot in the door and start developing the contacts. That's great, but I also think that there's this concern about balancing your studies and the work that you'll have to do, the responsibilities that you'll have at your job. Whereas I think the 1 or 2 years that you spend with us is really meant to set up this post-graduation phase. And if you use all of the different tools and opportunities to the best of your ability during those 1 or 2 years, you can get really well set up for the next 10 and 20 years in your career. So I see that as more of an investment, and hopefully students will be able to juggle those different opportunities. Last question that I have is, how long will it take to receive my offer? once I have applied. So for us, and once again, this is just focusing on us, when somebody applies, it usually takes a business day to get the initial evaluation of the application done. So then we'll contact that person. If they've submitted all the documents that we need and all the information, we'll contact them to schedule their online interview by Skype. Once the person has finished their interview, so you can choose the scheduling that you want. There's an online scheduling system. You choose the date and the time that's right for you. Once you finish that interview, you'll have the results within 1 week. Sorry, there's one last question. I think I still have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go for this one. Does the university help to find accommodation? How does it work? Yes. So we have a coordinator that works with this, and there's an online housing platform that we provide to registered students where they can go through those 3 different options that I was talking about, whether it's host families, whether it's these private housing options, or whether they're public subsidized housing options. You can go on there and you can find the one that's right for you. Once again, I'd kind of like to reiterate that it's better when you're able to search earlier, just because you have all the offers that start up here, tends to go down. The worst thing to do is to wait until end of July, beginning of August, because then it's not like there are no housing options, but it's just that you don't have as many options to choose from for what's right for you. So that finishes up the questions for me. Once again, I'd just like to reiterate, if you do have any additional questions, you want to get in contact with us, you can always contact us at international@audencia.com. We schedule online info calls, or we do these regular info sessions so that you can get more information about the programs or about us in particular. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you, Ben, for your brilliant presentation. Thank you for the students and their participation. It's been great hearing from you. Please do check out viva-mundo.com if you want to find out more and sign up to our newsletter, no problem. But other than that, do you have anything else for us? Last few words, Ben?
No, I think that's really kind of covered it. I think I wanted to go over the fact that, European and French business schools in particular do have an edge over some of these traditional areas that we tend to focus on. So it's just to give the information to students so that they know, don't just go traditionally into where you've heard of or where you've thought of. Try to figure out, where the real value is. And I think once you start looking into these opportunities that we have around the world, you'll find that there's a wealth of differences and advantages, particularly when we're talking about business schools in France.
Great. Okay, awesome. Well, have a great day, everybody, and be sure to ask us any more questions if you'd like to. Thank you. Bye.